leg are not moving enough or they're moving too much, right? So from your active range of motion, we're looking at, remember we talked about looking at the quality of the motion, even though I did not pay attention to that today, like where the motion is coming from. But maybe a little bit, we talked about if a segment that's moving too much or there's a stiffness in the spine. So the next thing will be to look at the passive physiological motion. Generally, you want to look at 3 segments, the segment you think is not moving or moving too much, and one above and below. But for learning purpose, we have to go through everything, right? So we're going to assess the entire lumbar spine with passive physiological motion. Now, theoretically, you're supposed to pick up hypo and hypermobility with this test, but I would say that it's easier to pick up hypomobility than hypermobility with this test. Clinically, it's just really hard unless you're very good. And you'll see in a minute why that is. So I'm going to have Chris lie down on his side facing me. Facing me.
Oh!
It's an implication.
Yep.
And you're going to have to scoot towards me if you don't mind, please. Okay? That's good. And have you just lie down and be comfortable. Okay, we want to make sure that they're comfortable. Seems like his head is supported. We don't want anybody's head tilted like this. And my cranial hand is going to be monitoring the motion, intersegmental motion, and my caudal hand is going to be moving his legs back and forth like this, just like the description suggests. Okay? So my hands are cold. I'm sorry. Okay. Relax. You guys know your landmarks, so I always start with the landmark that I know, which is iliac crest. Is it okay if I palpate?
Yeah.
And then I just kind of slide my finger back here, and we're likely to land where? What level of spinous process?
L2.
L2 at iliac crest? Boy, we really have a high iliac crest. Okay, 4-5. So if it's a space, it's most likely 4-5. If it's a spinous process, it's more likely L4. Now, some guys who are really tall, generally speaking, guys' pelvis sit higher than females. And so those who are really tall, if that spinous process that you feel in between the iliac crest may be L3 for them. Okay, but we'll go through it in terms of how you can identify L1, 2, 3, 4 all. But right now, let's just say this is L4 for him. And I'm going to have you scoot toward me just a tiny bit. That's good. Okay. And you can't see my posture, and I want him to relax as much as he can. Okay. So I basically am kind of a squatted position. His knees are on my thigh. And now I'm going to just kind of rock back and forth from my right leg to my left leg. Thank you. And so I'm just kind of going back and forth, and you can easily feel how much spacing he has. So if he had hypomobility, then the 2 spinous processes will move together, rather than gapping and closing and gapping and closing. So it's easier to pick up hypomobility. But imagine if he had increased mobility at that segment, it would be very hard for me to pick that up. Right? You really can't. We're talking about 3 millimeter or 3 degrees of motion. So somebody is having 4-5, well, that's hard to pick up. And that's why we have the accessory glide, and we will be able to pick up from that assessment. Okay? So let's go through this again. So just rocking knees back and forth, and then just going through all the segments. And you can easily palpate on him. So I would start out below, work up, and then go back and forth, and kind of just sense right now how much gapping. First of all, do you have your fingers in the right place, and can you feel that opening and closing between the segment? And then we'll regroup, and we'll talk about what angle his leg should be when you're palpating the top segments versus the bottom segments.
Did you put your 2 fingers on the 2 spinous processes, or one on the space and one on the spinous process?
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, so I usually go ahead and just put one finger in between, and the other two just kind of naturally land on the spinous process below and above, right? But I'm just paying attention to that opening closing. You can pay attention to the spinous process movement. I think that would be easier when you're first learning because it's easier to feel the motion of a bone than interspace. And so I would say one finger in between the spinous processes, one on the spinous process above and one below. Yeah. 3 fingers to start out with.